And welcome once again to another episode of the Horizon Roundtable. I am Bob McDonald, and you can find me on Twitter at Bob McDonald. And joining me, of course, is my co-host Matt Dudek.
Hey there, everybody.
Matt, of course, you can find on Twitter at Horizon Matt, and you can follow the podcast on Twitter as well at Horizon RT. And Matt, we've been hyping this up a little bit for the last couple weeks. Joining us today is Todd Buckingham from at Major underscore Mid. Thank you for coming back on the show again, Todd.
Yeah, hi everybody.
Yes. And Todd, if you follow Todd at all on Twitter, you know what we're going to talk about this week. He actually put together a list of fan rankings of listening.
I can't believe you. No, I'm just kidding.
And we'll get a little bit. We'll definitely delve into that a little bit. But before we do that, I want to get into the week that was. You know, we're recording this on a Sunday, so obviously we've got the Sunday games. We're not the Sunday games between Wright State and Northern Kentucky and UIC and IUPUI, and we haven't delved into that yet. I will say this: obviously, Wright State got over UIC being their kryptonite because they won pretty handily on Friday night on national television, I might add. So they're still Wright State's still in the driver's seat, and Northern Kentucky again also won. So again, no big.
Although they're a little banged up again, even worse than they have been.
A little bit, yeah. They were, yeah. Because what was the issue? I think Dantes Walton was, I believe, sick, wasn't he? No, he had an ankle injury.
He has an ankle injury, and Tyler Sharp was sick, and then he got hurt at the end of the game, and I haven't heard any.
Tyler Sharp had strep throat, if I understand it, man. That's no joke. And
That's
then
not fun.
with 13 seconds left in the game, Tyler Sharp rolls his ankle, which I'm sure was absolutely painful. So, but
Which do you think hurt more, his throat or his ankle?
maybe he's I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure one. You know what they say: if you hurt, one feeling usually negates the other one. So I don't know. So he's just hurting all over. I'm sure Tyler Sharp is just hurting all over right now.
Pretty much.
And so, yeah. So, and then of course we had Milwaukee and Green Bay, who was down to Milwaukee, came back and won that game. I tweeted this out. I think Amari Davis from Green Bay should be the hands down freshman of the year. He's probably going to win freshman of the week again this week. But yeah, he is absolutely, he is definitely making that statement right now to be freshman of the year. So I can't remember who tweeted at us about him possibly being a first team All Horizon League. I don't know about that. We're going to probably deliberate about that. What's going to happen with specifically on HorizonRoundtable.com? John Parker is actually going to put his list together, and then the week of March 1st, Jimmy Lemke and I is coming back, and him and I are going to deliberate over our list. So it probably is going to be two different lists, I'm sure. But I'm sure that discussion will be had. I don't doubt it. And last but not least is Oakland winning both their games at home. And I think that's all we need to say about that.
They looked good. It was kind of weird.
I don't want to talk about it.
I mean, Bob, didn't they play Cleveland one of those games? Aren't you? You're a Cleveland guy.
I believe they did. Man. So what you're referring to, and I'd like to point out the fact that Cleveland State is still down three guys. They're down three guys. Jalen Hill is still out. Craig Bodwan's out, and now Franklin Penn Jr. is out. And instead of talking about them only being that shorthanded and only losing to Oakland by 5, what are we talking about, Matt? What are we talking about?
I believe we're talking about the number 2 play on Sports Center from a couple days ago, where Rashad Williams, former Cleveland State member, who's been through a whole lot thanks to how some things were handled, he basically murdered Hugo Ferreira, who's coming off of an ankle injury, and he embarrassed him, and he put him on the ground, stared him down, made the three, and then did a little shimmy that set off everybody, and it got a lot of attention nationally and on Twitter and everywhere, and it was a lot of fun for Oakland, and they haven't had a whole lot of fun this year.
Yeah, I believe that video ESPN posted has over like 2 million views now, so that's awesome. Okay, couple things about that, and I want to talk about Hugo Ferreira a little bit. First of all, obviously, because of the injuries to Craig Baudouin and Franklin Penn Jr., he was in an unfamiliar situation, obviously, because usually he wouldn't be on Rashad Williams. It would be either Baudouin or Franklin Penn. So I want to have sympathy for him, but the problem is in the video he's actually trying to plead with the officials to get a foul. And I'm a Cleveland State fan, and even I'm like, man, the officials aren't gonna do it. You got your ankles broken. The officials are letting this one slide, whatever it is.
There was no offhand involved. He just got crossed up. Like you take your lick. Oh, yep.
The other part that I have an issue with this is the other part. I don't think lost in all of this is actually something that I don't really. Somebody from Cleveland State is absolutely gonna have to clarify for me. That during that game, Hugo Ferreira was wearing the number 10 in that game. Cause I had to check tape on that, and believe me, obviously, since the video is out all over the place,
pretty easy to check.
He was wearing number 10. Nobody at Cleveland State is supposed to be wearing number 10 at all. That number is retired. And I know this because that number is retired. That the number 10 was worn by Mouse McFadden, for crying out loud.
Oh, that wasn't Bryn Ford's number? You guys didn't retire that one?
No.
I was checking.
No, number 10. There were 3 numbers at Cleveland State that were retired. There's a number 14 of Franklin Edwards. There's a number 10. There's a number 30 of Norris Cole, and then there's a number 10 of Mouse McFadden. And I'm struggling to understand how on earth that happened. I'm trying to figure out. I mean, I'm a little concerned by that. I mean, I would be concerned, but obviously that was obviously during the Oakland game, that wasn't the biggest issue. But I was thinking about that all Saturday, and it didn't occur to me that was kind of an issue until Cleveland State broke out the black jerseys for the Detroit Mercy game, which of course I'm not a big. I hate the black jerseys. The black jerseys are cursed, except of course against Detroit Mercy because they actually beat Detroit Mercy. So yeah, so I was really, and Hugo Ferreira in that game was wearing the number 11. So, and usually Ferreira is wearing the number 20, so I was a little confused about all those things. But it is, I don't know why it's weird that I focus on those types of things, but it's like, no. But yeah, forgetting about all that, obviously Oakland has been playing much better as of late. I think the fact that Rashad Williams is a part of this lineup right now, it completely transforms the Oakland lineup. I really do. I really think so. That was pretty obvious to me during the Youngstown State game, where they were pretty much, they pretty much dominated that game. I did not expect them to do that.
Too long of an Oakland talk, but I was there obviously yesterday, and the biggest thing I took from that as an Oakland person is Oakland didn't have a great game. Rashad didn't go off for 40. X, had a double-double, but most of it was in the second half. Nobody played a great game, and Oakland still beat the number 3 team. That's a good day for them.
Yeah. So
and didn't just beat. There was never a time I thought Youngstown was going to come back and win that game.
Yeah, and that was kind of the case because Youngstown was cold. Youngstown State was cold that game, just flat out frigid. I don't know what exactly transpired between the Detroit game and the Oakland game, but that essentially was Youngstown State's opportunity to take sole possession of third place in the Horizon League, and it just didn't happen. Now they have a much have a much taller mountain to climb because now Youngstown State has 4 games left, and 2 of them are against Wright State in Northern Kentucky. Whereas Green Bay, who shares third place with Youngstown State, has a much easier road. So that's gonna that was definitely an opportunity for Youngstown State to kind of get into it, but now it's still doable for them, but it's going to be a lot tougher for them. It really is. So I think I guess the only saving grace for Youngstown State is that the games against Wright State and Northern Kentucky are at home, where they do much better at the House of Heart Attacks. But it's going to be a daunting task. It really is for Youngstown State.
A lot of work ahead of them, and they didn't look good really in either game this weekend. So they gotta hopefully double back a little bit and get some stuff together.
And for Youngstown State, there are some far-reaching ramifications for them because they are kind of on the cusp of a lot of things that haven't happened in a long ass time, like the fact that they're finally at a point where they can finish above 500 for the first time since God knows when. They have the chance to finish above 500 in the conference for the first time since God knows when. They have a chance to finish in the top half of the Horizon League, which I don't think they've done since the early 2000s. Actually, not even the early 2000s. I think I want to say since Kendrick Perry. Now, how long ago was that? I mean, so a lot of things that there's a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on Youngstown State right now, but yeah, that's where they're at.
Yep.
So, and I will also say this also. You had mentioned this during the Youngstown State Detroit Mercy game, where Antoine Davis, scored 34 points against Youngstown State, and the Titans still lost. And what happened? Yeah, you are absolutely correct, Matt. I looked at it, and I think it was. I can't remember how many shots he took, but it was more than 25, I'm pretty sure.
Detroit Mercy's just struggled. I actually went back and watched the Detroit-Cleveland State game today. Well, I skipped some of it because it was just unbearable at times, but I really tried to. Antoine Davis didn't make a three. He hurt his knee early, which is definitely something as Horizon fans we need to keep an eye on. That's not someone you want hurt. You want him playing at a high level.
Not to take away from the other thing too, and I know he was hurt and everything, but he was consistently getting his pocket picked by Jeremy Sanchez from Cleveland State. Now, Jeremy Sanchez, for those of you scoring at home, is not only a freshman at Cleveland State, he's a freshman walk-on at Cleveland State, and he stole the ball from Antoine Davis at least twice in that game.
I would also be terribly concerned if I'm one of the 7 Detroit Mercy fans out there. Hi, Carrick. I would be terribly concerned that with the game on the line, the play was 20-some seconds, ball in Mercy's hand, and Daddy just let Antoine dribble up top and take a terrible shot.
Again,
that was the game plan.
This is not the first time that's happened. This happened at Youngstown State too. Same exact game plan, and it. I don't know.
Me, I'm gonna have him up top. I'm gonna have everybody waiting for him to do that, and I'm gonna throw a lob to Chris Brandon because if I could take any one player off Detroit Mercy right now and put him on my team, it'd be Chris Brandon. I think the world of what he's doing, and man, if he had an opportunity to do a little bit more, I think it'd be even better. It's just too bad he can't make free throws.
Not making free throws was a running theme for both teams during that game. Cleveland State was absolutely atrocious. Honestly, if Cleveland State had actually if Cleveland State had actually made their free throws, this game wouldn't have gone into overtime. First of all,
Right.
It's a weird thing because Cleveland State has had such a love-hate relationship with free throws. Sometimes there are some games where they can shoot free throws like Mark Price, and then there are other games like Saturday where they're shooting the free throws like Shaq. I mean and there's no in between with them. It's so
Right.
utterly insane. I mean, utterly insane how they are so herky jerky with their free throws, Cleveland State. But again, turnabout is fair play because Chris Brandon obviously had an opportunity to tie the game, and he clanked one. So, but again, that wasn't, and I don't put that on him. I put that on the game planning. I think I put that on the game planning on the Detroit Mercy end, which I'm still struggling with. So, all right, so that was kind of the week that was, essentially.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. All right. So, on to the reason we have Todd on this week. So again, if you follow Todd at major_mid on February 10th, I believe that was last Monday, February 10th. He's been kind of hyping this up a little bit for a week or so prior. Or we were. But he actually put together his list of the Horizon League fan engagement rankings. Okay, and I think there was a little bit of confusion on this because I was seeing replies to Todd that didn't really speak to the actual fan engagement, but the team's performance. Okay.
Right.
Let's be clear, right? Let's be clear that they're not 1-7. Just if your team is doing okay, that doesn't necessarily mean your team is team's getting butts in the seats or terribly engaged as a fan base. All right, I think we've proven that in the Horizon League for many years. Just because your team's doing good doesn't mean anybody cares.
Correct.
That right, is true. And people got it even a little more confused because they would talk about team performance from 15 years ago, and
how is Detroit Mercy?
Again, this was not.
That's exactly what happened.
This was not a ranking of historic program or anything like that. It was just I went back 4 years on attendance and then looked at message boards and things like that, and then I did want to, and kind of to break ties or to rank some teams higher, I would go back and when was the last time the team won 20 games? Can I find YouTube clips? Was the place packed? Because we say, team performance doesn't lead to fan engagement, which is true, but it's also not shocking that the teams that do the best have the most engaged fans.
Of course.
And so I didn't want, my parallel is I'm a fan of a Pac-12 team that is historically not very good. So of course there's not a ton of fan engagement. And so I didn't, and that doesn't mean that there aren't hardcore fans for every team in the Horizon so it wasn't even a ranking of passion of fans or anything like that. It just was who's engaged and who's not.
Well, IUPUI doesn't have a fan, but go on.
No. So other than, I'm happy that the Jag Pound exists now and they're trying to do something there. It seems like the move off of campus for IUPUI, from what I could tell, just kind of looking back, was a really bad idea. And of course, when they had a 1,200 seat arena, if you want to call it an arena, it always looked more full. So there's that. You put 1,000 people in 1,200 seats, it's going to look more full. But
well, it was also helpful that they had, as you mentioned, it was also helpful they had like a guy like George Hill, who's an NBA player on their roster. It also helped immensely that you had a guy like Ron Hunter coaching.
I was at Oakland during those times, so we were all in the summit, and IUPUI was a formidable opponent. Yeah, their little gym was small, but they had passionate fans. They had a student section that was ready to go. They put on a nice product. Something has happened there, man. It's bad.
That's
I
what
think
I
it's
would
bigger
love
than
to.
the move.
Yeah, I would love to know what the hell happened. Yeah, I would love to know what the hell happened with IUPUI, because there were something, and I want to, but you also see parallels between the fall off with IUPUI and the fall off with Cleveland State.
Right.
And by the way,
the bottom.
I had to, and I just between 9 and 10. I know you have IUPUI at 10. You have Cleveland State at 9, and during the week and thinking of this, I was struggling. And by the way, I was struggling myself as an actual Cleveland State fan. One of the maybe 3 people who are. I was struggling to personally kind of square how they could be ranked 9. And it didn't help. So going back to the Oakland game, no more of a struggle. It was much more of an internal struggle for me as a Cleveland State fan to basically watch the Rashad Williams shot, and the reaction, not just from Oakland fans, but nationally, and to see absolutely zero Cleveland State fan take up for Hugo Ferreira. I wasn't gonna. That was just a fight I knew I was gonna lose. But I mean, come on, even the biggest stan you can do no wrong fan, a diehard in and of itself, that there was nothing.
Yeah.
I was actually at a point where between about Thursday night and Saturday afternoon, I was thinking, just based on that, Cleveland State should be at the bottom of the list.
They would have to pass IUPUI though, which is a more formidable.
I know it's no small feat.
I think. Yeah.
And I will say this too. By the way, Todd, I know that I know I've mentioned it recently. You did mention the fact that you did mention the demise of Cleveland State's message board. They actually do have another message board. 3 people go to it, but they have a new message board actually.
And that's good to know. What I will say is, as a person just Googling trying to find it.
Oh, good luck finding it.
There was no finding it. So to me, that's almost like it not existing.
Well, I know why it exists. I honestly know why it exists. It exists because one guy doesn't want to be on Twitter. That's it. Oh. That's the only reason. I know the whole story behind the new message board. It's because the people who are on the message board right now, there's maybe 3 or 4 people actually active on that board. I think I've seen. I knew one of them is on Twitter. The rest of them are not. So I don't know what to say.
And for 8 and 9, I mean, the 2 spots that I thought would get the most pushback were Detroit Mercy at 8. And actually, Northern Kentucky at 3. And I didn't get any pushback from Northern Kentucky, which was sort of surprising. Detroit Mercy, again, nobody can deny the history of the program. And you can't even really deny some of the history of Cleveland State. But both show that if a program just falls by the wayside, in all honesty, I would actually flip UIC in Detroit Mercy. I think in terms of fan engagement, I know in terms of their fans on social media, they're more active than the UIC guys. So I would actually probably flip. I personally would have UIC 8 and Detroit Mercy 7. I think at least from my standpoint, and I also will point out the fact, and I will point out the fact that our fan episodes, we have the 2, one being the upcoming Jimmy Lemke Fan Battle Royale that's coming, 2020 Jimmy Lemke Fan Battle Royale that we're going to be recording first week in May.
we already have a we have a Detroit Mercy representative, and we have for many years. UIC has always been kind of UIC on the other hand has been pretty herky jerky about in terms of participating. So I also take that into I also would take that into account as well. So that's kind of my thought process on where Detroit Mercy and UIC are placed in your list.
Well, and the pushback from Detroit Mercy couldn't necessarily. Obviously, this is a subjective list.
Yeah.
And I couldn't argue with some of the pushback from Detroit Mercy, especially Twitter. Detroit Mercy fans are pretty engaged.
Yes, they are.
And there's maybe a couple of people that are pretty consistent with UIC, but not many more than 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And the attendance numbers for UIC and Youngstown don't seem, and I know the explanation for Youngstown is football boosters that don't show up. Neither of their attendance numbers really pass the eye test when you look at the actual games. And they're not high necessarily, but UIC was consistently finishing 6th, right around there actually almost every year. And Youngstown about 4th for the last 3 years, and then they were down at 9th in the 16-17 season.
Yeah, and 16-17 was, let's see here. Yeah, 16-17 was the last year of Jerry Slocum. So that would explain a whole lot. Because 2017 is when they brought Jared Calhoun in. So that's probably where, when you see that 16-17 season in Youngstown State, that's where that comes from, essentially. In terms of engagement, as far as Youngstown State is concerned, I can't really argue with you on that. If you go on their message board right now, there's a lot more on the football side and comparatively little on the basketball side, especially now considering Youngstown State just got a new football coach. So they're kind of leaning into that right now.
The views were pretty high on. There is a ton more football, but the views were still pretty high on the basketball posts, which doesn't necessarily. I mean, that doesn't in itself say anything, but at least people are paying enough attention to look at the posts, do some commenting, things like that.
You know what I find interesting is Youngstown has a regular reporter. They seem to have a good local media coverage where I don't think UIC does.
Exactly,
John
Vargo
interesting how that plays out.
Yeah, John Vargo, who from the Warren Chronicle Tribune, who we've actually Tribune Chronicle, who we've had on the podcast, who is not only he's all about, he is the Youngstown beat, and they benefit from the fact that not a lot of these major cities have them. Chicago struggles. UIC struggles to get attention from Chicago. Cleveland State struggles to get attention from Cleveland. Even Wright State has to struggle with getting attention from Dayton because of the University of Dayton. So that Youngstown State has that is also a kind of enduring quality in terms of social media. Youngstown's a little different animal, I think. And I can't really exactly put my fingers on it. But and again from my perspective, when you talk about fan engagement in terms of how they participate when we call out for fans, that's a whole other animal as well, because that's been a struggle on our end too to get UIC to get both UIC and Youngstown State fans to participate in kind of the fan focused episodes too. So I think that will change, and I believe that it will be changing starting with the Fan Battle Royale this year. But that's just kind of my thought on that.
Well, and I know the argument we just talked about it, the argument of the inflated numbers on attendance, but 4th the last 3 years in Horizon League attendance. I get that they're giving some tickets away, but there's something to the number.
Yeah. And one of the other things too, and I know and this is something you didn't bring up, is that the big thing I think as well is this to me is also, I consider this would be pretty important too, is these teams engagement with the students. I think that's I think for me that's kind of a factor that we don't really. Well, I know we've talked about a lot on this podcast, and it really does shine through. And I think I think yesterday we got a comment about the fact that Youngstown State's student section isn't really that robust, whereas Northern Kentucky or Wright State, those guys are definitely got their stuff together. Oakland obviously.
Right.
And so that's kind of something that I am starting to factor in as well.
Yeah, there were two reasons I put Oakland above Northern Kentucky. And one was, and this isn't even a knock on the Northern Kentucky student section. I think they're one of the best in the Horizon, but Oakland is probably the most passionate and strongest, has the strongest network when it comes to the student section. And then the other part with Northern Kentucky is the year before they kind of surprisingly went to the NCAA tournament, or at least weren't the top team, but won the Horizon League tournament. In 16-17, they were 7th in Horizon attendance. And so it's still newer. And some history too. Obviously, Oakland has been around longer, all of those things. So it could certainly say, and maybe now Northern Kentucky has turned the corner and they'll be top 2 in attendance every year going forward. But not that long ago, it wasn't the case.
That's true.
Well, and my thing is, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, and I think, and you kind of see, and we've seen it over the past 3 years, kind of the resurgence, this surge of interest on the Northern Kentucky side, and I'm not just saying that because of the fact that we have that a bunch of our followers on Twitter are Northern Kentucky fans. Although that does help, I think in terms of fan bases, people following the Horizon Roundtable on Twitter, I think 1A would probably be, you probably put it as 1A and 1B. 1A being Northern Kentucky, 1B being Oakland.
Yeah,
I think the biggest thing.
Right. Go ahead, man.
The biggest thing I've seen is Northern Kentucky is definitely getting there. I mean, we all see what Valhalla does. Kyle Craven, North Shore, all those guys are doing great work. But the reality is, I think they're still struggling, especially with student support. Their student section hurts. They get on social media and they get after themselves, which I appreciate. They're very realistic, but they also promote themselves to try to get that section filled. And they've had some success, but it's not regular success. Oakland's Grizz Gang is regularly successful, even in a down year, you're still seeing a pretty full section. If you go back and look at the Youngstown game yesterday, the section was still very full, very loud, and was doing what Grizz Gang does. It's not at its peak. I'm not going to lie to you. But it's still very good, and I think it's probably the most consistent student section, even more so than Wright State. But I'm probably biased, and I accept that. But
sure,
I really do think that Oakland has the most consistent student section, and Northern Kentucky is getting there, but they're not there yet. And the other thing that hurts Northern Kentucky, at least when you watch their games on TV, is they have the best arena, but it's just too big for them still. So it's still even half full. They might have 4,000 people, and it's great, but it looks like a big cavern still. So as they grow more, it's going to get better for them. They're just not there yet.
True. So
yeah, the same thing you were just saying, Matt. But when I went back and watched several games, just went back this season, and it was bad for Oakland as far as product on the court. I don't have to tell you that for a lot of this season. And you'd go back to a game where you thought, well, this is when it was really bad. What does the student section look like? It was still pretty darn full. Whereas a lot of places that just wouldn't happen when the product isn't very good.
Before we get to I talk a little about them. I'm at the bottom of the list, which is a team that isn't even a Horizon League member yet, but they will be very soon in Purdue Fort Wayne. And I really think, and by the way, as I mentioned before, obviously, we have invited the Purdue Fort Wayne fan base to join us in this next Fan Battle Royale coming up in May. So I should also point out the fact that teams whose fan base does not participate in the fanboy battle royale will be subject to open ridicule. I think we mentioned that last fall. It's still going to be true, guys. So yeah, you guys better get your stuff together. We want everybody to participate, but specifically Fort Wayne and you now, Todd. I know you follow both the Horizon League and the Summit League pretty regularly. Tell us a little bit about Fort Wayne and kind of how they've been, what they're like. Because it doesn't sound, just based on your research, it doesn't sound like they have that robust a fan base either, which is really not helpful considering we already have one fan base who doesn't have that kind of reach either.
Yeah, as far as finishing, they're usually a middle of the pack, or at least in the last several years, middle of the pack Summit team. And when I didn't go back before this year with Fort Wayne to look, but if I were to, when I put their numbers together for this year, they're right around where IUPUI is, which we all know isn't a real big number. It's a smaller gym. It looks a lot like, I have not looked at the actual total attendance, but it looks a lot like the old jungle that IUPUI had. And so it looks a little more full, but the numbers are not very high. And when we're talking, I didn't go into there to look for message board. I have in the past. I didn't for this. The biggest reason I put them 11th is because then I can not have to rank one that's currently in the 11th. But then the numbers kind of matched it up too. So, but as far as Twitter goes, I don't get much, and it's anecdotal because it's just me, but I don't get a lot of response from Fort Wayne fans at all when I tweet anything Fort Wayne related.
That's interesting.
Todd, is Fort Wayne not playing their games at the Coliseum anymore? I know I
thought they were playing at the Memorial Coliseum, which is, from what I understand, a really nice facility.
Older, but it's nice.
That's a good question. I'll double check. When I watch games on ESPN, it seems pretty small. But like I said, I did not look at total capacity, and it's a nice. I mean, I don't think it's a bad arena. It just seems small.
If I remember, because that's where the Fort Wayne's G League team, the Mad Ants, play. I think.
Yes.
Right. So if I remember, I think Fort Wayne has like an on-site venue that they have to use sometimes, and they get into the Coliseum if there's not something else booked. If I remember how
that probably makes sense. Yeah, I just went at a couple of games, just because, again, you don't tend to look at the crowd while you're watching a game to watch the basketball. So when I went back for this, they must have been using that smaller facility in the couple of games I looked at.
Sure. Yeah, and I know that. Yeah, and I know. Well, and that's and I think in the case of Fort Wayne, I'm sure this is going, and hopefully this is going to be the case in. This is going to be what happens in their case, as opposed to what ended up actually happening with IUPUI, is that Fort Wayne is going to take some steps to step their game up, because I know as I understand it correctly, one of the things that they did during the off season last year was they actually boosted head coach John Kaufman's salary up considerably, in anticipation, presumably, of the move from the Summit to the Horizon. Also, the fact that John Kaufman's a pretty damn good coach, so that's so it probably is incentive for him to stick around as opposed to him getting poached by a Horizon League team, which last year was rumored to be Cleveland State at one point in time. So,
sorry, real quick side. I'm just actually looking through Purdue Fort Wayne box scores. They do seem to be playing at the Hilliard Gates Sports Center, which is probably that smaller venue, I'm guessing. So maybe something's changed there. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you I'm up on my Purdue Fort Wayne yet.
All right. Yeah, we'll have to obviously we'll have to do some research on kind of what they're all about moving forward, since they are in fact going to be a part of our conference sooner rather than later. And by the way, I guess we should be starting to ask what is the when does the switch flip on us talking, us getting Fort Wayne involved. Is that like at the end of the basketball season, or do we gotta wait till May? I don't want to wait till May. I'll be honest with you.
I'm good with after our championship's done. Whenever our last team's done playing, knocked out in the NCAA tournament, they're ours. That's how I feel about it.
Okay. And that's the other thing too. I think because they'll probably be because I think the Summit League and the Horizon League, their championship game for their conference tournament championship game are actually on the same night, as I recall. And unless something, while I would probably say as soon as the Summit League is eliminated from the NCAA tournament, I think that's when my switch would flip. Not necessarily the Horizon League, because theoretically it's possible that Wright State could, if they do win, or it's possible that the Horizon League team could actually win an NCAA tournament game this year. I'm not saying that they're going to, but possibly, especially the way that But anyway, but I think but let's get to obviously number one on your list, Todd, which was Wright State. There's no really denying that in terms of attendance, Wright State has been consistently at the top of the league.
Yeah, they were top all 4 years that I looked at for attendance. So that part was pretty easy. When you go to the message boards, the views are pretty similar to what you see at NKU, which is the other, I would say, most stacked message board, them in Oakland, the three teams. It was pretty comparable there. The only thing that Wright State doesn't necessarily have that Oakland and NKU have is their fans are just more quiet on places like Twitter and social media.
I know that's a thing we've discussed. I know that's a thing we've talked about. I know, we every time we have a fan forum, we got that one go-to guy, Ricky Redinger, who's probably going to participate in the Fan Battle Royale this year. But by and large, you're absolutely right. It's kind of a weird dynamic with Wright State, because if you go to the Raider Nation board, which Big D has had for years, that's a pretty active board. And at one point in time they had two message. Well, they technically do have two message boards still. One of them being Raider Nation, the other one was Raider Roundball. Which, by the way, Raider Roundball was this fan site that is not was. If you want to make a comparison to it, it is comparable to what the Norse Report is right now, doing the same exact thing. And I didn't realize that Raider Roundball itself, the actual site, actually shut down about a week and a half after the last Fan Battle Royale. I didn't even realize that. Big to me, I think that's a big loss in terms of in terms of Wright State, but clearly with the Raider Nation board, it kind of makes up for it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. In terms of social media engagement, it's relatively quiet in comparison to some of the other schools.
I also never get the impression. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go for it.
I wouldn't even say it's quiet as far as likes or retweets happen.
Yeah.
Pretty.
They're absolutely. They're very, in terms of retweeting, liking things. They're very. Wright State fans are very active. It's just actually
even members of the administration will get involved with retweeting and such. Yeah. They just don't talk trash.
No.
What's the fun in that?
Which is weird. Which is really weird. I don't understand that. I don't know.
Maybe it's the bad perception. I've just always felt that they struggle to consistently put a student base in there. The NKU game, my God, that Nutter Center was amazing. The atmosphere they built for that game on ESPN, that was it. If that was a fairly regular thing, man, there's no conversation to even be had. But I get the impression that was kind of a one-off, and that there's a lot of nights in the Nutter Center where you get a couple thousand people, because they do have some pretty regular fans, which is good. Dayton's just a great basketball area, but I get the impression it's a pretty quiet fan base. There's not a lot of student support all the time. Maybe that's just a bad perception, but that's the way it.
Banana Man notwithstanding.
I mean, why can't we get? I mean, I love Ricky. Don't get me wrong. I love that we always get Ricky, but can we get Banana Man?
I want Banana Man. I know we've talked about this. Yes, Banana Man. We know who you are, and you know who we are. So give us a holler. Banana Man for the somebody on the right. If you want to see Right State, this is your Right State fans. This is your challenge. If you've gotten to this part, if you've gotten to this point in the podcast, and I hope to God you have, this is your challenge. Get Banana Man. Retweet Banana Man. Tell me Banana Man for the fan battle royale. That's what I'm looking for. No disrespect to Ricky. Ricky, obviously, there's if Banana Man says no, the spot is always yours. But damn it, Banana Man for the fan battle royale.
I think Ricky'd have to wear a banana costume if we don't get Banana Man.
Yeah. So that's how we're gonna close out the show. Banana Man for the fan battle royale. That's gotta be a hashtag. I want to see at least one Right State fan break out that hashtag. Banana Man for the fan battle royale.
It's a long hashtag, man.
I don't care. I really don't.
Hey, Todd, thanks so much for putting all this together. Like we said, we were literally looking for someone who was mostly unbiased, and I think you did a great job. So thank you so much for taking more time than most people would
Absolutely.
put into this.
Oh, it was fun. I appreciated doing it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, follow Todd on Twitter at @major_mid. If you're in the Horizon League, he's definitely more. Todd. You're really probably as kind of that independent fan. It's kind of a breath of fresh air. We got somebody who's interested in kind of the Midwest majors that as much as you are. So it's great that we have you on there. And I'm sure, by the way, the Summit League fans are also clamoring for you to do a fan ranking on there. So good luck with that.
Yes, there has been asking for that as well. So I will put one together. And that's what I appreciate about the Horizon is just so much more active on Twitter. So for me, it really is. I mean, of course, there are players and teams at different times that I gravitate towards more than others, whether it be style of play or what have you. But I am not a fan of any of the team. I would hope whoever does well. So
that's amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, thank you for putting this together for us as a kind of neutral third party guy. That's awesome. So thank you again for doing that. Thank you for coming on and talking about it too. Really appreciate it as well. So other than that should do it. As always, you can find episodes of the Horizon Roundtable on horizonroundtable.com. You can find episodes of the Horizon Roundtable wherever podcasts are available, and of course, you can find episodes on your Amazon and Google devices. So, as always, thank you for listening.